Hello, my name is Mike Harper. What a pleasure to be with you today. I am the Church Planting and Church Health Director for the North Texas District Council of the Assemblies of God. We are sending this video to you directly from our district office. We are, like many organizations around the country today, shut down. I snuck in here because we had good internet, so I could record this video. Actually, we were recording two videos. The first video I'm going to be sending with you today is on assimilation, and the second video, which will follow this one, will be on evangelism. Before we get started on the videos, I'd like to thank Nadine and I'd like to thank Dwight for the opportunity to teach in the school today. I'm very excited about what God's doing in and around rural ministry. About a third of our churches here in the North Texas District are rural, and we're very excited. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today on assimilation is what we teach not only our urban, metropolitan, suburban churches, but it also the same content that we teach our rural ministry churches, and we find it to be very successful. So let's start off today by talking about assimilation by sharing a quick story. A number of years ago, my daughter was born. Her name is Carly. When my wife was in the delivery room, I'd never been in a room where a baby was born. And I had no idea that babies came out looking the way that they did. My wife's labor was long, 24 hours, something like that. The epidural didn't work. None of the medicines that they work for pain management really worked really well. So finally, after the baby was born, she was exhausted. And I just anticipated her just saying, hey, I just want to check out the baby to make sure it's got enough hands and feet and toes and fingers and eyes and ears. And then she's going to go to sleep. But boy, I was wrong. She said, give me that baby. So she took that baby and wiped the place off and loved and kissed on that baby. And with a drug-induced fervor, she said to me, here, you love and kiss on this baby. So I took that little paper gown that I had and wrapped off a spot and kissed on baby Carly. And then she said, go get Connor, who was our son, and at the time was about 8.5 years old. Connor was in the waiting room with his grandparents, and he came in, and I got down on my knees and I said, Bubba, if you want to live to see another day, you're going to love and kiss on this baby. So he was kind of mortified the way she looked, and I took the gown and wiped another place off, and he kissed her and loved and kissed on his new baby little sister. And what my wife was trying to do was not show us how loving that she was, but I think she was trying to teach us a broader lesson, that it was not baby Carly's responsibility to connect to the Harper household. Rather, it was the Harper's family's responsibility to connect with Carly. And I think the same could be true about assimilation. It is not that new person's responsibility to connect with the local church. Rather, it's the local church's responsibility to connect with them. And I just want to share with you some laws that I think are very important for us, and I want to give you some real practical content on the back side. So let's talk about laws for a minute. So a law is something that has consequences to it if you break it, or it's a law that governs us. And really, basically, if the speed limit is 55 miles an hour and you drive 70, you may get away with it for a few times, but eventually the law catches up with you and you may suffer the consequences. So same is true with assimilation. You may have an assimilation system that you think is working fine, and you may be violating all of these laws or one or two of them, but I would say to you that eventually the law catches up with you and you are suffering the consequences from not building the kind of assimilation system that you need that would allow you to connect to God's people to the household of faith. So real quickly, let me share with you the first law. And these are also, I want to make note once of all that on the Dropbox page, you'll notice that there are PowerPoint presentations as well as blank fill in the blank notes. And so you can kind of fill that in. Here we go. Law number one, it's really straightforward. Number one, your visitor flow represents 100% of your growth potential. In other words, you can grow your church by having babies, and that's a great way to grow the church. It's just a slow process. So the only way you really grow your church is by the number of visitors that walk through the door. Law number two is this, that your visitor retention is far more significant than your volume. Let's say that, break that one down one more time. Your retention, in other words, how many you keep, is so much more significant than your volume. In other words, Most of us, we think about the volume, how many visitors we're having each week. But I'd like to say to you that what also is equally and significantly more important is how much of those that you keep, your retention percentage. So let's do some quick math. Let's just say we're a church of 100 people, and we're trying to grow from 100 to 150 people in the next, let's give it 12 to 18 months. So here's some laws. Number one, the average church retains about 10% of its first-time guests if they do nothing. In other words, if you do very little as far as working to retain guests, you're going to retain about 10% of your visitors. The negative side of that is during that same time period, statistics tell us that the average church loses 10% of its annual membership because of death. People move, they get transferred, people go off to college, they get divorced, they get remarried, all kinds of things. And sometimes they just get ticked off at us and don't like us anymore and they leave our church. So in other words, if you do nothing, then you're just going to maintain where you are because you're going to keep about 10% and you're going to lose about 10%. Therefore, you're going to maintain a status quo. But the law says that your volume is important, but how much you keep. So let's do some quick math for those of you that are kind of math inclined. If you're at 100 and you're trying to grow to 150, that's a difference of 50 people. If you only retain 10% of all of your guests to grow from 100 to 150 in the next 18 months, to keep 50 of those people, in other words, you have to have 10% of 50 is 500. So in other words, you have to have 500 guests walk through your door in the next 12 to 18 months if you're going to grow by 50. Well, I don't know many churches that run 100 people that have that kind of a visitor volume and that kind of flow. But the law says that your retention rate is equally as important. So in other words, if I can increase your retention rate from 10% to 20%, instead of having to have 500 guests walk through the door, now we can reduce that number to 250. And in fact, I believe, and we teach here in North Texas, that you can have seasons where you gain 20 and 30% of your visitor flow. So once again, your retention rate is far more significant than your volume. So our goal in all of this is we need to really retain about 20% of all of our first-time guests. The third law is this. It takes people to reach other people. Now, here's the thing that you and I understand, that if we're a rural church or we're a smaller church, it's very hard for us to compete against big churches that have all the programs that you and I don't have. So the law says this, that people are attracted to other people and not programs. Your programs need to be important, but what is more important is that your people need to be friendly. So let me let you in on a secret. I'm in a different church every week. And I've never met a pastor who says to me, Mike, my people are just not friendly. No, I never hear that. What I always hear is, Mike, we are a friendly church. Now, in the back of my head, that little alarm goes off, and I know that that is code for this. We are friendly to each other, but not to other people. It's not uncommon for me to be at a church and no one will shake my hand. It's not uncommon for me to be at a church and someone will shake my hand but never engage me in a conversation. Here's the issue. People are attracted and connected to other people, not programs. So your church needs to be focused on not only being friendly with each other, but number 3, friendly with everyone. Law number 4 basically says this, that you and I need to set expectations and meet them. In other words, when people attend our church, they have a certain level of expectation. We call it hospitality. They expect us to meet their need and to be hospitable to them when they come to our church. So when we ask for information and they give us that information, there's an expectation that if we've given them our information, there needs to be a follow-up process in that. So what you and I need to recognize is that people come to our church with a certain level of expectations. They don't expect anonymity, especially if they're attending a smaller church. What they expect is for us to meet them, to greet them, and to be connected and do our best to connect with them long term. Law number 5 is that we must be proactive to connect with people. In other words, without being intentional, we default into being inward focused. We default into becoming all about us and not about other people. The natural tendency of an organization is to focus inward and not to be outward in our focus. Because here's what I recognize. Small group rules and principles teach us that relationships crystallize in about 12 to 18 months. In other words, once that people come to the church and connect with the church, they become a part of that church in 12 to 18 months. And it's very difficult for us to break into a new group. So it's very important for us as a church that is going to be proactive, that we put systems into place to make sure that we connect with new people as quick as we can. Law number 6 is this, that it takes time to win people into our church. Now, a guy by the name of Jonathan Gainsborough, who used to be a church growth guy decades ago, taught me something that he called the psychology of a first-time guest. So in other words, what Jonathan was saying to us is that when people come to our church, every time they make a subsequent visit, they're telling us and telegraphing us something about their interest in our church. So here's what a first-time guest is saying to us. Number 1, a first-time guest is really just kind of kicking the tires. They're just checking you out. If you live in a metropolitan area or in a suburban area, chances are you're one of 7 or 8 churches they're going to check out in the next period of time while they're church shopping. And so they're just checking you out. In fact, they've probably already checked you out on Facebook. They've already checked you out on your website. They're making sure that you're what they are looking for. Number 2, if they come back to you the second time, in essence, they are saying something about your church piqued my interest. You caught our attention, and I want to come back the second time to find out, was this an anomaly or is this a natural thing that happens at the church? I think all of us have gone to restaurants and we had a great meal there, and we were excited to come back the second time, and the meal just wasn't quite as good as it was the first time. Well, the same is true in church. People come back the second time to see, was that just a great service, or is this the normal thing that happens at this church? The third thing that people tell us if they come back the third time is that they're basically saying, if you'll take me, I'll be a part of this church. In other words, I've come back first time, I was just checking you out, came back the second time, I really saw that you're consistent, you have a great service, you were just as good the second time as you were the first, and now if you'll embrace my family, if you'll love and kiss on us, if you'll pull us close, we'd love to be a part of your church family. The 7th law, and this is a really important one, is this, that you and I must listen to our visitors. I would like to say this to you. Your visitors are telling you something about your church. Your visitors are giving you an indication of things that you and I need to be looking for. So as a consultant, I go to a church and I ask the pastor, hey, do you have a lot of first-time guests? If he does not have a lot of first-time guests, then his lack of a visitor flow is shouting to him. In other words, your guests are shouting things to you, but are you listening? So let's put our thinking caps on, as my second grade teacher would say, Miss Smith. And Miss Smith would say, let's put our thinking caps on for a minute. Let's act like a consultant. If you're not having very many first-time guests, what could our visitor or the lack of visitor flow be saying to us? Well, number 1 could be that our website's not very good. Number 2, they can't find us. Number 3, when they drive by our church, they don't want to come in. We have a bad reputation in town. Number 5, our our people may not be contagious. In other words, they may not be inviting their friends to church. So a lack of first-time visitors could be telling us all kinds of things if we're just listening. If we have a very good first-time visitor flow, but people don't come back the second time, what could they be saying to us? Well, if people don't come back the second time, it could be that we're not as good as we think we are, or our bathroom stinks, or people were not friendly to us, or our worship wasn't very good, our music was too loud, or we weren't relevant, the message didn't make sense, the children's ministry wasn't very good. There's a lot of things that if we have a lot of first-time visitors, but they never convert over to a second-time visitor, that we should be taking note of, because our visitors are shouting things to us. Let's say we have a lot of first-time visitors and a lot of second-time visitors that kind of come back, but we don't translate into people who stick with our church long-term. What could they be saying to us? Well, maybe our service is schizophrenic. What do I mean by that? Maybe we're good one week, but we're not very good the next week. Maybe we've got 4 or 5 different people who are wanting to circle through and lead worship, and we've got one team who leads one week and the next week they're not quite as good. There's a lot of things that they could be saying to us, but if you're looking in your outline, you'll notice down here that there's a study from the White House Office of Customer Affairs that indicates that 96% of dissatisfied business customers never take their complaint to the offending company. In other words, you're never hearing about why people are not coming back. In other words, for every complaint a company hears, 24 complaints are never received. The study's most frustrating findings, however, is that each of those dissatisfied customers will tell an average of 10 people about the problem. Could I say to you that churches are not much different? So it's important for us to not violate these 7 laws of assimilation. And you may be getting away with this for a while, but eventually the laws catch up with you. Now, the next part of our outline, we just want to share with you the 7 steps of assimilation that we teach all of our church planters, all of our church health participants, all of our cohorts, all of our churches. We teach this 7-step principle that is designed to help us grow our church. It meets and addresses each of these 7 laws. Now, it says in your outline that there's about 3 things that you and I need to have an effective assimilation system. I know I'm going fast. We're going to have a question and answer time Tuesday, and I'll be able to flesh this out in its entirety on that time and be able to answer any questions. But let me rush through it real quick, give you the high points, and then we'll catch up on Tuesday. The first thing that you need is some kind of a communication card. Could I tell you that you don't need to call it a guest card? You don't need to call it something. You don't need to have your guests stand up or lift your hands or whatever. They're not looking for that. What they're looking for is a simple way that you can connect with them. Here's the reality. You cannot follow up on people that you do not get the information on. Now, I would suggest to you that you should have 3 or 4 basic ways that you're always gathering people's information. Let me walk through those with you first. Number 1, you should never be able to check a child into children's ministry unless we're gathering contact information. Number 2, in our morning service, there's going to be a moment in the service where we're welcoming guests and we're asking people to fill out the communication card that allows us to connect with them. Number 3, at our hospitality booth, I would recommend that you have some kind of a meet and greet with the pastor after the service and say, hey, I stand by the water fountain over here. I'd love to meet with you. Have a person there that's standing with you to gather their information. Number 4, another very easy way is often people will not fill out information, but they may be a giver. And so if they're giving new information, if we're adding a new giver to our database, that's also another way where we can gather their information. So on that communication card, it needs to have a couple of things. Number 1, it should have a box whether this is their first, second, or third attendance. Now, why? Well, we want to track that because as we increase our visitor flow, it's very difficult for us to maintain and recognize, well, they were here 2 weeks ago, or they may here be 3 weeks ago. And once your volume increases, you need to have a system that you would be able to categorize first, second, or third time guest. I would really recommend you put it in a bulletin and have everyone in your church fill out the communication card. Drive people toward your communication card. Let it be the place where they sign up for things. Let it be the place where they fill out information. Let it be the place where they put in prayer requests. And if they can just recycle that if they need to. The second thing is that you need an assimilation team. Robin Wood was my church plant coach when my wife and I planted our first church in Phoenix, Arizona. And Robin said to me, Mike, you and your wife are the assimilation team. It's just you and mama. And he said, you just by yourself, you and Rhonda can put the next 100 people in your church and add the next $125,000, $135,000 to your annual budget by just working this simple system. So I would say to you that you don't need a lot of people to do this. They just need you and your wife. You are the assimilation team. You are the people that will grow this church. The third thing that I believe that you need, and my coach Robin Wood taught me, and I teach it around the world, is that you need a gift. Every guest needs a gift. In Louisiana, they call it a lagniappe. It's a little something extra. It's a little something that they weren't expecting. So my friends know that I love key lime pie, that I love pecan pie. And if I go to their house, it's not uncommon for me when I get ready to leave for the lady of the house to say, hey, Mike, I've got a little something extra for you. And she'll give me a piece of pecan pie or key lime pie. It's just an added gift of hospitality. Likewise, my mom taught me that when people come to our house or when we go to people's houses, that we take a gift and so we'll drop off a plant, we'll bring some candy, we'll bring something special because it's hospitality. And a gift of a hospitality is really appreciated by all. And it just goes to say that we were expecting you and we've got something special for you. We really appreciate that. Now, I would say to you that you need to make sure that the gift is appropriate for your congregation. I consulted with the church. I won't tell you who it is because everybody knows who this guy is. But his gift, every first-time guest, was a picture of the drawing of the lion and the lamb. And it was the drawing of the lion laying next to the lamb. And it just had sentimental value for him. And I would say to him, nobody wants that. Give them a gift that they want. Could I say to you, they don't want your preaching tape. They don't want your latest book. I give them a $5 gift card to Starbucks or to Sonic or someplace, but give them a gift that's appropriate. And a lot of my friends give t-shirts. And everybody gets a t-shirt. So those are the three things that you need to have a real effective assimilation system. Now, I want to speed up and I want to share with you that these are the 7 steps that we teach all of our church people, all of our churches about how to have an effective assimilation system. So the first step number 1 is when they come to your church and they fill out that guest card, it triggers a phone call. Now, this phone call takes place by someone other than the senior pastor before 7 o'clock on that Sunday evening. Now, this is a 20-second phone call. This is not a big, long call. This is a call from someone that says, hey, thank you for being our guest at the crossing. We really appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing you next week, okay? This is not a call from a chatty Kathy who says, man, wasn't our pastor's message great? And it doesn't need to be from you either. It needs to be from someone. My wife made these calls for a lot of years when we first started. Now, let me give you statistics. Statistics show that an immediate thank you call within the first 8 hours, get that, within the first 8 hours makes the return visit potential increase by 30 to 40%. In other words, if I make that phone call in the first 8 hours at thanking them for their visit, the likelihood of them coming back, all things considered, increases by 30 or 40% in comparison to the first contact being made after the first 24 hours. So the second thing is that you need to drop off a gift at their home. Now, there was a girl in my church. She made the best snickerdoodles cookies in the world. And so we said to April, would you just would you make snickerdoodles for every first-time guest? We'll provide you all the materials. It won't take you anything. All it takes is just your time. And these are just the best cookies in the world. And so I'm telling you, if it had just been to me, I would have just put them in a Ziploc bag and dropped them off. But my wife said, no, we're going to put it in a bag and put some frilly stuff in there. And I had a handwritten card. And we dropped this card off at their home, usually Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening or on Monday night. And let me give you a couple of rules about this. Gifts are delivered by at least 2 team members, and you should never go by yourself. The second rule is that this gift is offered in the name of the pastor in the church. And the third rule, which is probably the most important rule, is do not ever, for any reason, go into their home. Now, I live in the South, and it's not uncommon for people to invite you to their home and say, hey, just come on in. But can I tell you from experience, in the back of their mind and underneath their breath, they're praying, oh, Father in heaven, please don't let this guy come in. My baby's running around in a diaper. My husband is watching football in his boxer shorts, drinking a beer. And they're going to invite you in, but they're just praying that you don't come in. The second reason why you shouldn't go in is because I tell people all the time, you never know who you're going to knock on the door. They could be an axe murderer. And I just say to them, the presence of the Lord does not cross that threshold. So if you go in that house, you're on your own. But I'm just telling you, they don't want you to go in. Number 2, you don't need to go in. And number 3, your excuse can be, my partner's in the car and the car's running. And so my wife and I would knock on doors. I'd leave the car door open, the car running, the dome light on, and they could look out and see my wife. And sure enough, it gave me a reason never to go into their home. Step number 3 in our 7-step process, this is all taking within their first visit, is Monday or Tuesday, whichever day my office is open, I'm going to send them a G1 for guest 1 or a V1 for visitor 1, however you want to call it. It's just a letter. It's a form letter, and it just says, thank you for being our guest. I always personally sign it. If I met them, I will sign it and say, hey, it was a pleasure meeting you. I hope to see you again soon. If I didn't meet them for whatever reason, I would sign it. Listen, I stand by the water fountain by the west door. I'd love to meet you next Sunday, whatever it is. And I just recall something about their family if I met them. Great that you moved from Arizona or from Dallas or whatever it is. Just personalize it as best I can. Step number 4, remember, this is still all within their very first visit. Step number 4 is I, the pastor, am going to make a personal call on Saturday morning after 10 o'clock and before noon. So about a 2-hour window there, I'm going to make a phone call. Now, why am I going to make that phone call? Man, I just want to touch base with them. That by that point in time, they've received a letter. They've received some amazing cookies. And I just want to call and just say, thank you for being our guest. I'm glad you're here. I'd love to meet you. And this creates a culture of, wow, even the pastor cares. Now, I know some of you are thinking, wow, doesn't that make us look desperate? No, I don't think it makes us look desperate at all. It makes us, I've delivered thousands and thousands of dozens of cookies. It just says we care. Remember, it's not Carly's responsibility to connect the family to me. It's my responsibility to connect Carly to our family. Okay. Step number 5 triggers our second, let me start all over. Step 5 is triggered by their second visit. You guys all have done those tongue twisters. So when they come back the second time and they check the second box, this is my second time to come, then I am going to call them Sunday afternoon before 5 p.m. Now, why is it important for me to call them that second Sunday when they come back the second time? Well, number 1, I'm going to thank them for being our guest. And number 2, if they have a question about our church, I want to make sure I answer it before anybody else does. If there was something unusual that happened, a message in tongues, someone gave a personal prophecy, or they may not come from our expression of worship, and they may have some questions, there's no one better equipped to answer that question than I am. It also triggers a V2 or a guest to letter that just says, hey, I recognize you came back the second time. Let me share some more information about our church. And the step number 6 is triggered by their third visit. Now, I will tell you, when I make that phone call on that first Sunday or that first Saturday after they come, people always would ask me, hey, if I come back to that church, am I going to get some more snickerdoodles? And I would say, well, you just have to try and come back and see. You just never know. The third visit triggers a letter that I call the V3 letter, the G3 letter, the guest third letter. And it just simply says, man, we want to thank you for being back at our church. And I make sure that I sign that letter, your pastor. Remember, if they come back one time, they're kicking the tires. They come back two, something piqued their interest. They come back the third time, it says, I want to be a part of this church, and I'm acknowledging that. Now, the final step is in that letter, I will make note of a gathering at my home where I'm going to invite all of our third-time guests to a gathering at my house, purely social. And I'm going to say you'll be getting an invitation on that, and you'll be getting that shortly. Now, let me give you some things that you need to know about that. I mean this with all of my heart. As the pastor of the church, you are the most attractive feature of that church. Now, don't get a big head. I'm not saying you're the best looking. What I am saying is that you are the most attractional. In other words, you are the glue of that church, and people want to connect with you. They want to see you. They want to meet you. They want to spend time with you. And you need to leverage this as best you can. Now, let me tell you about my first experience. My wife and I, we lived in a little bitty house when we planted our first church. And everybody in our community that came to our church lived in big houses. People worked for Intel, Motorola, Microchip, Aerospace, like Ally Signal. They all made great money, and we lived in this little bitty cracker box. And we were somewhat embarrassed. But my coach said, Robin says, no, they need to come to your house. And so we would come to our house, and people would come. And here's what you need to know. You need to wait till you have 5 or 6 or 7 families that can come, because there's nothing worse than having a gathering at your house when it's nothing but introverts. So you need to make sure that you've got a wide variety of loud and soft people to make it a party. Now, let me give you a couple of things. Number one, this is not a time for you to cast vision. This is really just a personal gathering. Number two, you need to invite new small group leaders to this event. Now, I am the most attractive feature of the church, meaning people want to connect with me, but I also can become the bottleneck of the church when I am the only I'm the only person that people are connecting to. So my goal would be to start new groups. You know the rule, new groups for new people. If a small group leader comes to my house and I meet Steve, and Steve rides motorcycles, and I've got a small group leader who rides motorcycles, I'm going to pass the baton off and slowly back out of that opportunity so that they can come and become friends. Now, here's what I say to my small group leaders. If you come to my house and you cannot catch fish in my house, I would say to you, depart from me, you worker of iniquity. You're a lousy small group leader. Now, I'm going to train them, but once their group gets full, I'm going to invite a new small group leader to my house. I'm going to keep this process going. Now, a couple of quick questions about this that I always get asked. How often? Do it as often as you can when you have 5 or 6 people. I have found that the more the merrier. There were times that you could barely walk through our house because we was just jam-packed with 25, 35, 40 couples gathering together. Number 2, what kind of food to have? I just finger food. It's just nothing special. But they want to see you. They want to meet with you. They want to make that connection, okay? Now, also that guest, that last triggers the step number 7, which is a new information. That is going to invite them to a next step opportunity, whether it be our Life Point groups, whether it be our ministry classes, whether it be our next membership class, whatever it may be, whatever their next sequential step is, that is going to happen at their house. Now, a little caveat and I'm done. The last thing that I would say to you is this. Could I suggest to you that you're eating with the wrong people? Every Sunday afternoon or Sunday after church, you're going out to eat with people that are already connected to your church. I would really love for you to think about taking the new people in your church out for lunch. Now, here's what I did. I ate at the same restaurant year after year after year, ate at the same table, had the same waiter, set it up and says, listen, I'll make a great tip if he'll just stay out of the way, keep our glasses full. But Sunday's a work day for me. And so the church paid for my meal every Sunday when I would take first and second time guests out for lunch. Now, I know some of you are thinking, wow, that gets expensive. Well, it's a return on investment. Let me do some quick numbers with you. The average church that I work with here in North Texas, that's not a new church plant, but it's been around for a while. Their average per capita giving, that's man, woman, boy, girl, divided by their average attendance, total giving divided by your Sunday morning attendance, that is per capita, ranges anywhere between $1,700 and $1,800, all the way to $2,500 per person. So it means a family of four potentially could give on the high end $8,000, maybe $10,000 a year. So for me to go out and make that connection with them, and it's a $60, $70, $80 meal, and they would give $6,000 or $8,000 to the church the next year, that's a small investment to make. Now, here's what I would say. That you need to know that if I take you to lunch and I'm paying for it, I keep about 75%, 80% of all the people that I would eat with. Now, it's a small investment to make. And so I want to thank you for our time together. I know it's kind of a quick, but I was asked to do about 30 minutes. I think I'm just a hair over. But I look forward to meeting with you on Tuesday. Once again, Matthew 16:18. Jesus says, I will build my church. The question I have for you is, are you participating with what God wants to do in your church by putting together a comprehensive, strategic assimilation system that would allow you to keep 20% and seasons of upwards of 30, 40% of your first-time guests? If you have any questions, please make note of those. I'm going to teach you how to increase that visitor flow with our next video. I look forward to talking to you and seeing you again very soon. God bless.